If you're tired of seeing conversions come out of these 50s lift-in cases, tonight I'm not playing. From Jim's personal collection, an original 1956 Gibson Goldtop. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. I'll never forget the day I first saw this at Jim's shop, because I just fell in love with it instantaneously, because not only is it a very cool, rare vintage piece, but it's one of those gold tops where you can very clearly see the flame figuring underneath the gold paint. Now, he was telling me it's a slight off-center seam, and I told him, don't get any ideas, Jim, don't do this one. 56s are too expensive to do conversions on. But 56 is a very important year for Gibson Les Pauls because of one thing: introduction of the ABR-1 Bridge on the Les Paul model. Now, technically, it first came out around 1955 at the NAMM show, which is what Gibson just recently did a reissuing of in all those cool custom colors. And sadly, we didn't get to review one of those, but I told you I got something better, and this is what I was talking about: an original 56. So next year is when we swap over into the humbuckers, which would make it look something like this, and we had just evolved from the wrap tail piece. But another little fun fact about Les Paul history is when these were discontinued, circa 1960-ish, when they came back in 68, this is what they chose to bring it back with. Before, in about a year, it becomes the Les Paul Deluxe, and you get the introduction of the mini humbuckers. Now, unfortunately, I don't have some grand detailed story and history of this one. Jim had just purchased it from one of his friends about 7 years ago, and it's been in his personal collection since. Still has the original lift-in case. Inside here, we even have some cool old cables and a deteriorating strap. And oh my, even a case key. He's not crazy about letting it go, but he does have it posted on Gbase for a price if you want to make it yours. But for today, let's just document a 56. Let's see what secrets we can uncover, starting with our pickups. Jim is a tried and true humbucker guy, but he said even he was converted on this set of P90s. So I'm excited to get to try that out. This looks correct from what I know about the 50s era of Gibson, and he agrees. But as always, the best part about looking inside a vintage Goldtop is it's happy to see ya, with your two P90 screw holes making the eyes and the long neck tenon creating your face. But that's a very clean route. You can very clearly see your maple block capping off your truss rod right there, and completely undisturbed cavity routes. Thought it was cool to see the magnets on a vintage P90 as well. But for the bridge pickup, I was unsuccessful in being able to remove the cover. I mean, it feels like I could force it, but this isn't my 56 Goldtop, and I don't want to buy it today. So we're just gonna leave that there. But this looks exactly the same as the neck pickup. Our little rubber grommet over there is just hiding underneath the tape. And here's our cavity route for this one, also completely undisturbed. I thought this was interesting. It looks like the bridge pickup actually gets hoisted up with these wooden spacers, where the neck pickup doesn't. And I'd imagine that's just for your pickup heights in general. You need your bridge one to stick out more. And if you check out these cavities, these do not have any type of springs or anything to help you set that. They are routed into position. So they're definitely not as deep as, say, a Gibson 50s P90 standard that's made yet today. I also wanted to take a second to look at the actual plastics used on this. Last time that we took a look at a 53 Goldtop, I made a remark on just how thin they were and brittle, and like how they were shaven down in certain areas. Jim was telling me it was around 1955-ish that they switched into what most people think about today, the ones that have the UC452F branding to them right here. So when custom shop R6s are created today, it's based on these, and this is a much more robust plastic. I don't have any fear about this breaking off. I did note that there's like this little ridge over here, so maybe that could help you identify an original one, because both of those do indeed appear to have that, but only on one side, so that's pretty cool. As far as our readings within the circuit, 7.93 in the bridge, our neck a little bit hotter at 8, then they play together nicely at 3.98. Now let's move on to our ABR-1 Bridge. If you're wondering, what's the big deal about the ABR-1? Is it really that fantastic? You gotta remember, in 52-53, it's a wrap under trapeze. 54-55, it's a dedicated wrap tail piece. Neither of those have adjustable intonation, or even an intonation ridge. And now you're telling me I have a dedicated bridge where I can adjust each and every string saddle to get the intonation to my preferences? It's a miracle. Now we've got to be really careful messing with this one, because this is a non-wire retainer one, so these saddles will just fall straight out. But very carefully, here's the backside of this ABR-1. It's got the foundry mark as well as that little shelf that we're looking for. This looks correct. I'm holding history in my hands, a very early ABR-1. that we still use today. Now it does appear to be slightly collapsed, but hey, this thing's from 1956. Post-mounted directly to the body. But now our tailpiece. Similar to the wrap tails, except for you just go straight through and you don't have any intonation ridges over here. And this is super ultra lightweight aluminum. You can see our casting mark on the back. But now for the fun part, looking at the body. So right up here, Goldtops are known for greening. Usually what happens is the clear coat wears a little bit, and then sweat and other things can get underneath the finish, and then the bronze powder and all that reacts, and then you get the greening effect. Nowadays, people seem to really like that, but a lot of original Goldtops were refinished because somebody's like, ew, it's turning green over here. And to be fair, some examples get really grotesque looking. But this one is actually relatively mild. You have just enough to be like, yeah, that's the real deal stuff. But check out the poker chip. The font and how raised these letters are, very iconic. And it's here. Why not take a closer look at our switch tip? I wouldn't know how to tell a 50s one from a modern day replica. I'd say the biggest area of wear on this one is actually something to do with the finish right here. It's like somebody's sweat has reacted to it ever so slightly. It's almost like a greening effect, but not super extreme. Like you could almost say it's like an orange peel like feel right here. So somebody's hand must have been resting right there or something like that. And you've got a couple of nicks and dings. One right here that shows through to the wood. Unfortunately, not seeing a lot of flame, but again, that's what I love about this example. You can still see all the good figuring that this one has underneath it while still having a gold top. Not many people notice, but you can actually see under solid color paints if you have a nice clean wall and a flashlight. So here you can see the flame figuring that's hiding underneath this gold top finish. You can even see like a little bit of bird's eye figuring and a whole bunch of mineral streaks. Now, if I had a more powerful flashlight with me, we'd probably be able to see it a little bit better. But I was trying to see where the center seam line might be, but there's so much mineral streakage right there, I couldn't actually find which one is that direct center line. But it's got that whole like bear claw thing going on here. So that was cool to see. But you can also see that this gold top is faded a little bit. You can see the shadows of our ABR-1 Bridge. I noticed right here, it's a lot more golden. Like that's probably what this looked like originally all over. That was probably shaded by the pick guard or something. So we can take a close look at our knobs right here with our thumb bleeders. Jim says these are the original knobs. But it's 2 volumes, 2 tones, all your regular stuff. And as far as your pick guard, what struck me most about this was not actually any casting marks necessarily, but just how over-routed it is for the screw. I don't know if that's a characteristic of all these or what, but something to keep in mind. You can see that same phenomenon down here by our slotted screw. Something interesting I noticed about this pickguard are the chatter marks along the edge. I don't think I've ever seen that done up on a reissue. They're very prominent right here. You can certainly still see some on the other side, but the other edges aren't quite as extreme. I think that's kind of a cool look though. And yes, even all the way back in 56, we've got pickguard dings. Now we can move on from our 2-piece maple top and mahogany body on this one to our mahogany neck with rosewood fretboard. Not just any rosewood though, this is true Brazilian. However, this has been refretted, so it's not the original fret wire unfortunately, and he did not actually do the refret work on this. He said his buddy had it refretted by someone, I think in the Nashville area. My memory's a little bit fuzzy on that particular story, but Jim was saying he did a fantastic job on this and he wouldn't have done it any other way. Usually when you refret, you also do a new nut. I would imagine that's the case, but I'm not sure. But specs of a 52 gold top, 1.71 inches at the nut, 2.09 by the 12th, 0.9 first fret neck depth, 0.99 by the 12th. This is not a huge neck by any means. Usually when I think of a 1957 Les Paul or 58, I think giant baseball bat, uncomfortable. This feels very similar to a Gibson USA 50s neck, where it's rounded but not obnoxious. This is a perfect little Goldilocks here. That's not 60s slim taper by any means, but not too cumbersome. Here's a look at that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. You can see that C shape I'm talking about. So this is not that whole soft V into regular chunky C that we've seen on the earlier 50s gold tops. This particular one has definitely lessened that effect. But it is there just ever so slightly. It is chunkier in this area, but by about the 4th fret, it's just a regular C shape. So that just seems to be a 50s-like spec. But this one's definitely more rounded before they went really crazy. If I can believe the reissues I've tried anyway. And it utilizes that 24 3/4 inch scale and retains that 12-inch fretboard radius. Moving on to the headstock now. Let's talk about our truss rod. Seems to be in pretty good shape for the year. But in looking at the truss rod cover, I was like, where's the roller marks? This is supposed to be 50s, right? Is this a replacement? So right when I was about to ask Jim about it, if you get it in the light just right, you can still see them. It's just not as pronounced as some other ones that I've seen in the past. So maybe there's some variances there, maybe not. I'm not sure. The rest of the headstock is quite peachy though. Beautiful vintage Gibson logo. And it's not super low by any means. That's how a lot of the ones that we have been documenting are. And the Les Paul model silkscreen. Then pay special attention to our tuners because we'll have to talk about them on the back. Now it's time to move on to the backside. This thing is very clean for its age. I don't see a lot of buckle worming and wear. I mean, there's still a little bit, don't get me wrong. You got a couple of nicks and dings. I would say the biggest areas of wear on this thing are actually on the edge. Must have been dinging up against something. Maybe a stand, because both sides are pretty well equally as dinged up. But do you see that? The mahogany body has this really cool chatoyance to it where it just dances in the light. That's especially prominent on the side that you see while playing. It just has a lot of different character going on. It's probably one of my favorite things about this one outside being able to see the flame through the gold. But let's dive into our electronics. These certainly look their age, but we do have our original Bumblebee capacitors. They're famous in their own right today, and you can actually see the maple top in the flesh without paint on it and not seeing its reflections on a wall. It certainly looks pretty nice. But as far as the pots, I can see some markings over here, but I could not get a clear enough read on it. But thankfully, I was able to get this one. The top of the pot has two different markings that you're going to be looking for. The USA branding, as well as the CRL, standing for Centralab. That's the maker of the pot. So then when you see it on the side, 134 matches up with the manufacturer, Centralab. That's their code. Then the next one tells you the year within the 50s. So this is a 1955 dated pot. Then the last two tell you the week of production, so 42nd week. So late 55 pot codes, matching up with what I would assume is a pretty late 56 serial. I would say those solder joints look good, so that's within the realm of possibility. But cool to see how they routed this out. They basically just take away all the mahogany and then the maple tops right there as part of the channel route. And our ground wires going through down there. But you have a lot of residual pore filler or something along the edge of the cavity. That was also present in our toggle switch. But man, they really had to jam that thing in there, bend it all up just to make it fit in that tiny route. Here's what your brown backplate looks like. And now your larger control cavity backplate. Looks like we even still have our original output jack plate. The plastic material with a regular style strap button at the bottom and in our usual location. Before we move on to the neck, we might as well take a look at our thin binding in the cutaway, another spot that you can see the maple cap exposed. But now our neck. Looks like we have some sort of a stand rash-like situation there. We'll have to see how that glows under blacklight. But you can actually see there's a little bit of flame in the neck as well, just in case you didn't have enough flame already on this gold top. It's not too crazy, but a little bit goes a long way. And you've got some mild finish checking. However, when I was looking at these tuners, I noticed something strange. So your treble side one reads Gibson Deluxe. It's a single line, single ring Clusen tuner. Makes sense. We've got the same thing over here. However, in looking at different examples, it appears that maybe you could find both. So is it possible this is a mixed set? I don't know. But they are of similar style, but you do definitely have two different style tuners on this thing. If you're a serious buyer for this guitar, feel free to reach out to Jim. I'm sure he can tell you all about it. But the serial number, 6, tells you it's 1956, and then the rest is a production number as far as I'm aware. Whole bunch of 2s. But now let's do a blacklight test. Had you had missed that finish chip, you can easily see it here, as well as the areas where the finish has slightly worn and greened along the edge of the binding. As far as our plastics and everything else, I would say they're glowing and very even. Headstock's looking peachy, and everything's looking pretty good on the back too. You can see some of those buckle scratches a bit easier. My theory of seeing this better under black light definitely rings true. Something reacted to it at some point. It doesn't look like any breaks, cracks, or repairs, just some finish checking. Serial number's good, and our neck pocket looks fine to me. That's a mighty fine example. Super even. But if everything we just saw doesn't make you fall in love with this, wait till you see the weight. 8 pounds, 4 ounces. That's a really nice weight on a solid body Les Paul from the 50s. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how these P90s sound. The neck pickup's nice and full. Then our bridge. And then together. That has a really compressed sound to it. At least in comparison to the neck pickup. But now let's try some dirt. Now let's mess around with our volume control. Such a vastly different tone just by turning it down. So there we go, a legitimate 1956 Gibson Les Paul. What are my final thoughts on this thing? It's so resonant. It sings acoustically. You feel it vibrating in your hand. There is something special to the 50s Gibsons, and this one is just so lightweight. It doesn't weigh anything. I can see how people could play these on stage for a while. Now that said, what makes a guitar $80,000 plus? It's the history. You gotta pay a huge premium for that. Will a 56 reissue get you fairly close out of the Gibson custom shop? Sure, but you gotta pay the big bucks to have the real deal. So thank you so much, Jim, for letting me borrow this original 1956 Gibson Les Paul to document on my show. It was quite a treat to get to spend some time with this. But all right, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed our little journey with Jim. I think we've documented pretty much the bulk majority of his stuff, but who knows what he'll have in the future. So I'm sure we will see more from him. But that's all I have planned for today. Take care.